Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Let me start out with one question. What comes to your mind when I talk about the Russian language? When you hear the Russian language, do you think of this, or even this? Some people, they think of the complicated alphabet. They think of those letters that are also kind of in the alphabet we use, but not really kind of thing. Some people think it's a really difficult language. Some people think it's impossible to learn. Well, today I am going to make this video all about learning the Russian language. Now, before I tell you all these tips and tricks, I wanted to share a story about a teenager. Now this teenager, he's about 17, 18 years old, has no Russian ancestry, has never been to Russia, does not have any Russian friends, does not have any connection with the language whatsoever. But he managed to learn the language over a period of time. And, at a certain point, began to converse with people. He began attending events and began speaking the language. He began starting a new job in which he had to actually use the language. And he started being really comfortable with the language, and it's been a really big part of his life. Who is this person? Well, this teenager was me. Hi, my name is Nick, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my personal experience learning Russian and the ups and downs and some tricks and tips to help you with that. I was this teenager, like I said. I was 17 or 18 when I started learning the language, and I started from nothing, okay? Not honestly perfectly, but I am able to converse with people and I'm able to speak the language at a comfortable level, at a conversational level. And I wanted to make this video just to respond to a few questions that people have asked me.
Всем привет, меня зовут Ник, мне 24 года. Люди всегда спрашивают меня, как ты выучил русский язык самостоятельно и с чего начать изучать иностранный язык или русский язык. Это очень хороший вопрос, и сегодня я отвечу на все эти вопросы. Прежде всего, добро пожаловать на мой канал. Это на самом деле мой первый видео на мой канал, мой новый канал на YouTube. Наконец-то я запустил свой канал на YouTube. Я очень рад этому, потому что это мой самый недавний проект в этом году. Я очень рад этому. И сегодня очень интересный день, потому что сегодня я буду говорить об изучении русского языка, как я учил русский язык самостоятельно. Потому что например, я никогда в жизни не брал урок русского языка. Я просто учил самостоятельно. То есть, если вы изучаете русский язык, посмотрите это видео, потому что я постараюсь объяснить мой способ, как я учил русский язык. И вот, я надеюсь, что вам понравится это видео. Я надеюсь, что это видео будет для вас полезным и интересным. И пока-пока.
Okay, so I hope you like that mini video of me speaking the language. I'm going to introduce a few rules which I think are fundamental principles of learning the Russian language, but also these are the same kind of principles and fundamentals that I would say would be applicable for any language. So if you're learning, I don't know, Cantonese or Swahili or Japanese or, I don't know, Spanish, whatever language that you're learning, I wanted to let you know that any of these tips that I'm sharing with you today are very applicable to your situation as well, okay? So Russian, people think it's like super difficult. People think it's impossible for them to learn that language. But rest assured that I have actually met people who speak the language, who've learned the language just like myself. I've met people that have reached a very, very high level in the language. And I wanted to tell you that it is possible. It is totally possible for you. It's possible. If it was possible for me, it's possible for you, basically is what I'm saying. Right now, I'm going to be talking about rule number 1. Rule number 1 is, this may seem obvious to you, for a lot of people, but for a lot of people, it's not. Rule number 1 is to start. Yes, to start. And I say this because in North America especially, people, they have this idea of learning a new language to explore a new culture, to open up their horizons and blah, 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 okay? They have this idea, they romanticize this idea of learning a language, but a lot of the times people don't end up doing that, okay? They wanna, learn a few phrases here and there, but they have the desire to learn a new language, but they don't actually do it. Rule number 1 is to start, to put your foot down and say, I want to start this language. Start a proper routine for yourself. Start putting goals for yourself. This is requiring action on your part. This is what I say to people. It's up to you. And for me, if you want to learn that language, honey, you gotta work for it, okay? You gotta work for that language. Put yourself to a point that it becomes part of your daily routine and that you're actually willing to do something about it. So one of the first things I would share with you is actually learning the alphabet, the alphabet that's used in Russian. Now, when we talk about the alphabet, this is actually so cool. The Cyrillic alphabet. Now, the Cyrillic alphabet is interestingly used in a lot of other languages, okay? The Cyrillic alphabet and the letters in this alphabet are actually used also in Ukrainian. It's used in Serbian. It's used in a lot of Slavic languages, Belarusian as well. It's used in Bulgarian. It's also used in a lot of countries that were part of the USSR. Kazakh language, I think now it's changing, but they used to use Cyrillic alphabet, Mongolian. The alphabet is a really, really important thing to learn once you started the language because it gives you a good foundation with pronunciation. And this alphabet, you can learn it in less than a week. There are tons of videos on YouTube. There are tons of programs out there that explain it, and it's totally doable. To give you an idea for myself, after, even less than a week, I think 3 days, I learned the alphabet. And with that knowledge, I was able to read. I was able to, writing took a longer time, but I was able to read a lot, and I was able to go right into the resources of learning because I knew how to read. And a lot of people, when they learn Russian, they kind of hold that off to the side, but I think that's the fundamental thing that really gives you a strong foundation, because once you know how to read and you know how to take a word and you know how to say the word just by looking at the letters, I think that's a really, really strong start to your language learning. Now, my second rule number 2 is this: consistency. Consistency, consistency, consistency. And this, I think, should have been rule number 1, to be honest. This is what I say to people, to students, okay? I say to them, 30 minutes a day goes a longer way than sitting down once a week for 7 hours and studying. I wholeheartedly believe that. And this is because in between your study sessions, right? In between your study sessions, your brain is figuring it out. It's getting that daily dose. It's really important to space it out in between your study schedule. Think of a funnel like this size, okay? Like a funnel. Imagine taking a hose from one of those fire trucks and just putting it full blast into that small, tiny funnel. What will happen? Will all the water go in? Absolutely not, right? So it's the same principle for learning a language. If you try to sit down, study for 7 hours, that is not effective. That is totally what you should not be doing. So consistency is about being consistent on a daily basis. And to give you an example, when I was learning Russian, I believe that it took me less time than some other people because I learned Monday to Sunday. I did not take any breaks. I was literally studying for an hour and a half a day. And that's not including podcasts, that's not including like movies and all this fun other stuff that I was listening to, like music and YouTube videos, right? And I think that the consistency is what carried me through. I don't think I'm like gifted in languages, I don't think so. But it was really my consistency and doing something every day for a year and a half. And it could be any skill, like a year and a half of doing something like that every single day, even on my birthday, even on Christmas, it'll go a long, long way. And it's so effective. Think of this as like meeting a friend, right? So when you meet a friend, in the beginning, you may be a bit shy, maybe a bit reserved. And this is because you don't know them. You don't know their personality, you don't know their sense of humor, you don't know who they are like personally. And that's the same thing with languages. When you start learning a language, you don't know the sentence structures, you don't know some of the pronunciation. You may be reserved in the beginning, but once you do something every day, that language starts to become your friend. And you will open up your heart and mind to that language. And you'll begin to have that language part of you and your identity a little bit. And you will begin to have a familiarity with sentence structure, how the language sounds. I think that's really important, and that only comes with consistency, which is really the fundamental key of learning a new language. Rule number 3 is this: stop comparing the language to English. Stop. It is not the same language. And from my experience, I see students or language learners, they fall into a ditch, and sometimes they are there stuck for a very long time. And this is because they trap themselves in English, okay? They ask themselves, why is this like this? When in English, it's like this. Let me tell you one thing. English, the language structure in English is completely different. And if you base your language learning on English, you will not go far. And it will actually restrain you because your brain will constantly be questioning. I think that's a really limiting aspect of learning a language, and it's one of the reasons people don't learn effectively. For me, I think my language learning process becomes easier the moment I start to let go. When I start to accept that I'm learning a language for the language, not having English as a basis for that. Because too many people, they get trapped in that. You should just accept the language, accept it. Accept that in Russian, the subject doesn't always go first, okay? Accept in Russian that there are masculine, feminine nouns and neuter nouns, okay? Accept the fact, just breathe it in and accept it wholeheartedly. Rule number 4, and I think this is a really, really, really important one. I learn language through context. And what does that mean? This means that for me, when I learn a certain word, I learn the word sometimes on the spot, but a lot of the times I learn it because I see it again and again and again and again and again and again in different contexts. I can see a word in a YouTube video, in a book. I'll see it in one of the resources I'm learning. And once I see that word so many times, in so many different contexts, in a music video, in a movie, I see it 50 times, it's gonna get to my brain. And the interesting thing about this is your brain is smarter than you think it is. And if you are consistent and you're following all these rules, your brain can actually figure things out for you. And you gotta trust me when I say this. It's really, really, really interesting. There are certain sentence structures that in Russian, and I'll give you some examples in a bit, that I don't even know what it is. Okay, I search it up in the dictionary, I still don't know what it is, which happens a lot. And I hear this word or verb or whatever again and again in different contexts throughout a long period of time. And all of a sudden, a light bulb kind of like lights up in my head. And then I kind of understand after so many different contexts and so many different ways of saying it, right? I'll give you an example. If this doesn't make sense to you, I'll give you an example. I learned the instrumental case. I learned an aspect of the instrumental case, which is one of the cases in Russian that may be hard to use, okay? So the instrumental case I learned by listening and reading and writing and all that. But before I explain, okay, I want to explain one of the ways it's used. So the instrumental case is used when you're talking about a job, occupation. One of the first words I learned was работать, which means to work. So here the different ways работать is used. Работай, which is I work. Работаешь, работайте, работаем. So I hear all these different ways that работать is used, and then I hear it. I heard somebody in a podcast say, Я работаю программистом. And I'm like, программистом? What's that? So I looked in the dictionary, программистом, okay, программистом, and that is programmer. And I was so confused because программист is the word for programmer. So I was like, why is it программистом? I don't understand. I didn't understand at the moment. But after a while, I watched a few videos of people on YouTube, movies and stuff. I began to hear Я работаю поваром. And I was like, поваром. Okay, повар means chef. And they say поваром. Okay. Why does it have a at the end? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and then I hear somebody else. Ты работаешь преподавателем. Ты работаешь преподавателем. And I search преподавателем, and it's teacher. Преподаватель is teacher. Преподавателем is teacher. Work. I was like, okay, all these words have a at the end. Oh, okay. Everything that's job related with the verb работать uses the instrumental case. So it really was such an interesting moment for me. I was like, okay. So this is just an example of using language and learning language in context. Because once you hear something 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, okay, you will begin to know it and you will begin to kind of feel it in you and it starts to seep into your brain. And if you think that this is I'm just out of my mind, that might be the case, but it really, really worked for me. Right now I'm going to be talking about resources, and this is really important because in the beginning you want to start out with good resources that will encourage you and give you a proper introduction to the language. Now, a good resource would be one that has the alphabet and teaches you how to say the letters of that alphabet, Cyrillic alphabet, and it also teaches you a little bit of the writing, how to write it, okay? Another thing that I feel is really important is a resource that has a lot of dialogue, a lot of the spoken language, a lot of people talking with a transcription, with the words from that transcription. You want to know how the language is used in a conversation because you will be using the language in a conversation. You want something that has two people talking or three people talking and having daily conversations, okay? Talking about their home life, talking about their jobs, talking about themselves, about their families, talking about adjectives, talking about these fundamental aspects of the language that I think are really, really important when you're out there, when you're like talking to people. So with this said, I think it's also really important to have like a language resource with a program that has a proper structure to it. I'll give you an example. One of the language resources I used was Colloquial series, the Routledge, but I'll post the link somewhere in my description. I'm not affiliated with them in this video. I'm just letting you know that I used it. It has a dialogue, it has a proper structure on how to approach the language. He starts off with someone coming to St. Petersburg, and it shows kind of a proper structure, you know? Same thing with Colloquial series. I've used the Colloquial series for like different languages as well, with Cantonese and Ukrainian, whatever. I used it for that as well, and it's really good because it talks about different things in different units, okay? It talks about family here, it talks about different themes, but it does it in bite-sized chunks, so it's not too overwhelming in the beginning. I also use Russian Accelerator, which is, I don't know if it still exists because I started learning the language a few years ago, but it's a guy that learned the language. He made a series on starting with the Russian alphabet. He basically teaches Russian with all the cases, without teaching really the grammar, actually. He has a very, very interesting approach, and it's all video based. So it's you watching a video of his lesson. He basically teaches you the language and all the fundamentals by videos. But I really do think that one is really good for having an introduction to cases without really explaining the cases, if that makes any sense, right? I use also Assimil. Assimil is used by a lot of polyglots. A lot of the polyglots I've met in the past. Assimil, the only thing about it is it may not be beginner friendly for someone who has never learned a second language or third language before. Like if you've never learned a language before, you may find it overwhelming because it dives straight into the dialogues and it doesn't explain everything step by step. So it just kind of has a very, very, very strong focus on dialogues and teaching the language and the grammar and the sentence structures through dialogue. I think it's really cool. I'm going to do a review on it in the future, but I really do want to recommend Assimil as well for everyone who wants to have a supplement to their dialogues as well. With that being said, I think it's also really, really important to learn the language with multiple resources at once. That's actually one of the key things that has worked for me personally. I was learning Russian with like 4 different resources at once, and I was doing all the lessons from these resources, and I found that super, super, super helpful because I see it in different contexts. Like I was mentioning, I see the language in different contexts, and I also have the grammar explained to me in different ways. One book explains it to me in one way, I still don't get it, but I have a little bit of knowledge. I jump to the next resource, and that resource kind of explains it in a clearer way, and I kind of get it more. And the third resource explains it perfectly because I looked at 2 other resources, and I kind of get it, right? So one of the key components of that is using multiple resources at once, and I found that really, really helpful. All right, so right now I'm going to be talking about Russian grammar. Now, the bulk of Russian grammar really focuses on cases, the different kinds of cases, and I'll explain that in a bit. Verbs of motion, also perfect and perfective verbs. Now, if you don't have any familiarity with these things, don't worry about it. I might explain these concepts in another video, but a lot of people generally say that Russian grammar is difficult, okay? A lot of people say that. And you know what I say? I say that's true. It is insanely difficult. That's absolutely right. Now, that's only right if you study from a grammar book and you study from a dictionary. If you study like just, each case starting from a grammar book, if you do that, and if you have to learn every word with a case chart, okay, if you learn every verb with a verb chart, with all the different conjugations of the verb, every single conjugation of it, you know what? That's gonna take forever. And that is not an effective method at all. If I had to do that, if I had to look at a verb chart for every verb I had to learn and memorize every single thing one by one and just study from the verb charts instead of having a proper method, I would never be able to speak the language conversationally. And if I do, it would take years, honestly. It's not an effective method, and trust me when I say that. I think learning the grammar is important for a lot of people, and it is important, but I find that for a language like Russian, with its complexity, it's really important to be efficient as well, and to make the language experience a bit more bearable for yourself, right? So for me, what I do a lot is I do a lot of listening to the language. You will hear all the different forms of those verbs and nouns and all that wonderful stuff. For me, everything is linked together. All these concepts that I've talked about today, contextualization, consistency, if you put this together, ladies and gentlemen, if you put this together along with learning stuff in context, it will carry you through all of these hard and difficult grammar related issues. I learn through context most of the time, seeing the word change forms in different contexts, okay? And before I even go to that, I wanted to explain the concept of case. Cases are found in many, many languages. It's found in most, I think, all Slavic languages. And in the case of Russian, we can find that a word changes form depending on its role and depending on its case in a sentence. There are different cases in Russian. There's the prepositional case, the nominative case, the genitive case, the dative case, the instrumental case. Am I missing one? Accusative case. All these lovely cases. The unfortunate thing is the word changes form depending on the case that you're using, right? And it also changes form depending on the gender of the noun, and it also changes form depending on if it's singular or plural. Imagine this is an example on the screen of a word that has all the cases, all the possibilities of what the case may be. Get that? Whatever the case may be. Yeah, so this is an example of that. Okay, imagine if I learned a new word and I had to do this every single time, right? That would be difficult. So for me, what I notice is there are patterns, and I pick up on these patterns when I'm reading. For example, one of the first nouns that you are going to be learning in your journey is the word drug, which means friend. When I passively listen to Russian, or when I'm listening to a podcast, when I'm watching movies, I pay attention to a lot of the ways in which drug can be used in different cases. Let's just say I learned the word drug one day. I will hear sometimes druga, okay? I was like, oh, interesting, druga. Я получил подарок от моего друга. Oh, от моего друга. So I received a gift from my friend. Okay, so that's genitive case. Okay, I learned it's genitive case when you're receiving something from somebody. Genitive case. Oh, interesting. And I'll go on and I'll be like, I'll hear с другом. С другом, with a friend. Okay, interesting. And maybe the next day I'll learn много друзей, and I look it up and it's like, okay, genitive plural. Okay, друзей, много друзей. And basically I go on and on and on. I slowly hear all the different forms of друг. Maybe the next day I'll hear я даю подарок другу. Я даю подарок другу. And it's okay, so I'm giving a gift to a friend, giving to someone. That is using dative case. Ah, interesting. So basically what I'm saying is the cases, if you learn language in context, if you are consistent with the language, so that means you're listening, you're watching, you're reading every single day, you will begin to pick up on these patterns. I actually just pick up on the language and how the different contexts it's used, especially when I'm reading a lot. I read a lot of Russian when I started, especially a lot of different texts. I read on the site called Lingq. I'm gonna post the link to Lingq in the description. Okay, I'm not affiliated with them in this video. When you have a free account in Lingq, you can actually read and listen to a lot of different things. And from that point on, you begin to see a lot of the cases, and you see them in the very similar patterns, and again and again and again. And it really, once you see that and again and again and again, with a consistency, trust me, it seeps into your brain. With Lingq especially, I have a lot of experiences in which I don't even understand how, sometimes I'm reading something, I don't understand what it means. I don't understand how it works grammatically. And for me personally, I'm the type of person that gets really frustrated with that. But like I said, with consistency, with perseverance, with contextual learning, eventually, with a few Google searches, eventually I get it, right? So you just have to be patient and really, really, really drill it in your mind. This leads me to another point, which is sentence mining. So sentence mining is exactly how you hear it. These are basically drilling a sentence structure, a verb conjugation, a kind of grammatical concept into your brain, okay, by putting something into different sentences all over and over again. And it's usually when you're learning a certain sentence structure or verb conjugation, it's taking that concept and using it in different sentences and using it in different contexts. I really like this method because, like I said, when you see something many times, you'll remember it. So one of the ways I kind of access some sentences for sentence mining is the website I mentioned earlier, which is Lingq. And in this website, there are tons of texts that are for beginners of the language, and they really drill in your head a lot of the beginner sentence structures. I think it's even more helpful if you yourself make sentences out of it. Now, this is where I see the biggest change. Some people like to learn super passively, but I think there is a certain value of learning when you yourself are involved in the process, when you yourself start to create your own sentences. And for me, I do my own kind of drills as well. So when I learn a new word or a new sentence structure or a new verb or a new verb conjugation, I try to immediately put that in sentences, and I try to make my own sentences out of it. And I remember when I was still a beginner, I distinctly remember the sentences I've made even to this day. The first word I learned was это, right? This, or like demonstrating something. Me, when I was learning, I would be это компьютер. I'd be like talking to myself, okay? Это книга. Это мой друг. Это моя подруга. Это моя сестра. Это мой брат. Trying to pretend to show people things, right? So I'd be like using the word это, and I'd be learning all these nouns. And then after, I'd be learning like occupations, okay? I'd be learning like different verbs. For example, I'll be going back to the example of работать. I'd be learning the он, она. Он is he, она is she. Он работает, она работает. So I'd be putting all these things together. I'd be making my own sentences. I'd be like, где он работает? Он работает в ресторане. I'd be like, она работает в ресторане. Он работает в школе. Он работает на Украине. Он работает в России. Он работает в Лос-Анджелесе. And I'd be learning the prepositional case, and I'd be like putting all that stuff in together. I'd be putting larger sentences, and the sentences would be growing. So I'd be like, это мой друг. Он программист. Он работает программистом в компании в Лос-Анджелесе. I'd be doing something like that, right? I'd be like learning sentences like that. I'd be like making my own sentences and trying to sentence mine my way through. And I found that really, really effective. The other thing I wanted to share with you is this website called Wiktionary. So Wiktionary is an amazing website. I don't have a dictionary for Russian. I just use Wiktionary because it shows you like all of the verb conjugations for a certain verb. It shows you how a noun is used in different cases. Okay, so I use Wiktionary a lot. In the beginning, I never memorized like the verbs. I just went straight to Wiktionary, and because I use the language, I make my own sentences, right? I sentence mine, as I say. I begin to learn all the different conjugations of all the verbs I can imagine, right? All the verbs that I'm learning. I learn all the conjugations because I'm sentence mining them. I would kind of look through Wiktionary. I would look through the verb conjugation I wanna do, and I would be using that in different sentences. And ladies and gentlemen, like I said before, this is all contextual. It is perseverance, it's consistency, it's everything I've been talking about. It's contextual learning. All this is combined together, and if all this is combined together, you will be learning the language, right? When you see a verb or when you see a noun in a sentence, it's not in its original form, okay? And if you take that word and search it up in a dictionary, in a normal dictionary, you may not be able to find it exactly how it's spelled out or heard. However, if you type that word in Wiktionary, you will be able to find it. And not only that, but Wiktionary also tells you what case that word is in or what verb conjugation that word is in. And that is in itself awesome. And this leads us to our last rule of the video, which is to go and connect with native speakers and practice the language. I find this so motivating for myself, and the only motivation for me learning a language is to be able to speak to other people, because that's what a language is supposed to be for. The primary focus of a language is to communicate like this. Since I live in a multicultural kind of city, it's very easy for me to go out of my house and go to certain restaurants and meet people who speak whatever language I want to learn. But for other people, it's a bit more difficult only because of the place you live in and the lack of resources in that way. What I would suggest in that case is a website called iTalki. iTalki is not affiliated in this video, but I really used it myself. And there are a lot of different community tutors and teachers there that can help you with your conversational skills. I make sentences out of myself, but it really makes a difference when you're communicating with a native speaker who is actually trying to interact with you, and you having that feeling of being put on the spot and being able to stand on your own 2 feet and be able to have a conversation with someone with the knowledge that you have acquired from your independent language learning, right? I think that's one of the most beautiful times of when learning a new language is when you're able to use it and have a connection with somebody else. That being said, I also would encourage you to join perhaps a meetup or something in your community. I use Meetup. Was it meetup.com or meetup.ca? I don't remember. I use that as well when I try to find groups in my community that are trying to put together a language exchange. I benefited a lot from those kinds of events in my city. You guys have Google. Try to Google search a few language events or something, maybe a festival where you live that celebrates that language. In my channel, I'm making a lot of videos of me entering like restaurants or supermarkets and bakeries and stuff like that, and I start talking with people. That's going to be in my channel. I'm continuing to make those videos. So if you want to support me in that, please subscribe to this channel. I'd be more than happy to make those videos for you. This concludes the end of our video. I hope you learned quite a lot from it. I do want to focus on the nitty-gritty stuff, maybe in another video in the future, but I hope this is more than enough for you to digest and give some motivation to your language learning journey, whether it's Russian, whether it's French, Spanish, whatever it may be. I really wish you the best, and I hope to see you improve, and see you soon in this channel. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you around soon. Пока-пока. До свидания.